Well, Gallows Hill was a project that came to me when I was an executive at Lionsgate, and I just gravitated towards it immediately because it just had all the classic elements of a good suspense movie, a thriller, a horror story. What was interesting about it, though, is at the time I felt like we had seen a lot of Cabin in the Woods movies, and in fact, it was a few years before we actually got Cabin in the Woods. But what was interesting to me about it is the dynamic between the family, because it really is about two fathers and two daughters, and there's other things that go on, but that's really at the heart of it. What was interesting to me, I remember talking to the writer and the fellow who came up with the story, who subsequently became the producer as well with me, David Higgins. I said, "This is great, but I've just seen this great Hungarian movie called Taxidermy, and I have this idea. Let's make the best movie to come out of Hungary." And that was the last time I heard from them for a while. Years later, I was off producing films on my own and inquired, bumped into Rich, the writer, and said, "Whatever happened?" And he said, "Well, it's still available." I said, "Well, okay, what about, if not Hungary, let's talk about maybe South America." And he said, "Why are you so interested in doing Gallows Hill as a foreign language? We've set it in Massachusetts. We want to do it in English." And I said, "There's a lot of films kind of like it. Family goes off the road, they stumble upon this abandoned place, bad things happen." I said, "What's interesting to me is, characters in really uncertain circumstances and situations. For me, this is my first time in Colombia, so even just being at the airport or walking around town, there's this level of tension internally just because I'm unfamiliar with the language and the customs, and I'm always interested in that. Plus, I have a long past in horror films, and for me, the best horror films are ones that rely on light and mood and tension, and it's not so much about the story as much as the story that you convey. So I really didn't think it was important that it be in English, and then sometimes I feel that when you have to sit forward and read a little bit, you become more engaged. So I'd always kind of wanted to do this as a foreign language film. And in fact, my initial thought was, let's just do it all in Spanish. I rewrote the picture in Spanish with a friend of mine, because I speak none, and then gave it back to Rich and David, and they said, "Oh, this could kind of work." But when we started looking for sales agents and things like that, we realized that the best opportunity was to make it an American family traveling in Colombia. And so we actually kind of have a hybrid where there's just enough uncertainty and lack of understanding of the language with some of the characters that we can kind of create a little bit more tension. The fact that we found Innova and RCN just made it easy to make the film that we wanted to make, and then when we got here we saw we could actually make it bigger and better. Well, what's interesting is Victor, as the director, who's fantastic, he'll tell you that he's the guy they go to when they want to make sequels and remakes, has actually had such a great experience in horror films and genre films. And the big mistake you can make when you're looking at a director for this kind of project is to get somebody who isn't familiar with what the genre is. There's a lot of movies where people want to capitalize on the ability to make a movie that doesn't necessarily require cast and can be a genre film and then sell and do well, very well commercially, but they don't necessarily know the techniques, and they end up becoming hardcore dramas wrapped up in a poster of a genre film, but they don't really understand the nuances of the shots you need, of the mood. Victor knows that very well. Getting him involved, and also we knew that when we came in we wanted to get a director who spoke Spanish, because we knew the crew would be speaking Spanish, and it needs to be that intimacy. And so it worked out really well with Victor. And as we work on the process, we find that we have very much the same story point and movie point identifiers. So it's a shorthand. When we were talking about script, we could sit down with him and say, well, it's like that moment in this picture, or when we're kind of making the movie. In fact, just a moment ago, David Higgins, our producer, said, well, it's like Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner. We all know exactly the scene that he meant. So there's a great shorthand for Victor. The cast was really rather fortuitous. I mean, Peter Facinelli is a great coup for us because on one hand, he has great commercial recognition from the Twilight series, from Nurse Jackie, and from all the work he's done over the years, and yet he isn't overexposed. So you get great awareness, you get a great fan base, and yet you don't get somebody who people automatically say, oh, that's a video movie, or oh, that's a broad comedy, and kind of dismiss it or feel that they can wait 3 months and get another film starring him. So he was a great coup for us. We knew we wanted an international flavor as well, because one of the reasons why these movies work is because they work around the world. It's not like you just make them and they work in the US and then you hope to get some sales in other territories. You can really tap into the markets everywhere. So getting Sophia Myles, who's British, getting Natalia Ramos, who's I think she's part Australian, part Colombian, part U.S., but also comes with the brand recognition of the Bratz franchise, just rounded out and gave it a nice flavor, and it doesn't look like a cast you would see everywhere. And then, of course, our Colombian actors have been chosen wisely by people here and given us great exposure. Sebastian comes in and plays Ramon. Carolyn Guerrero, who plays Gina. They add this great flavor, and Gustavo just has this ability to embody all that we wanted from Felipe, just with a brooding look. And while he doesn't have the most lines, you look at him and you know there's menace. So for us, it was really a great opportunity to make it look like a cast where you might say, I recognize some of those people, and those other ones look very interesting. So it was a great cast choice. Well, it's interesting when you watch this movie, and for me, the scene that really kind of tells it. I'm a Rube Goldberg fanatic. I love the Final Destination movies where something starts here and ends here, and you're not quite sure how you're going to get from point A to point B. That's what I love, and I love that about this movie. It's actually what was always very interesting to me about the Saw movies, which I did, which was there are these guys locked in a room. How'd they get there, and how are they going to get out? I'm really interested in the maneuverability of it. There's a scene in this movie which very much is the same way. We give you the characters, we give you the setting, and we start to dole out the mythology. Hopefully we haven't gotten so far ahead where it's obvious. And so when the time you get to the lake sequence, which is my favorite, you're in this situation where you know what your rooting interest is in the characters, and then you realize that your rooting interest is counterproductive to what they really need to do to survive. Because, spoilers, should you actually do what you emotionally know you have to do to save yourself, you may actually endanger yourself at the same time. So the lake sequence was really important for me, and it's one of the reasons why we paid particular attention to that. There were then some other moments that kind of came along as we were shooting that became signature moments. Gina and Ramon manipulating Gina to attack Jill in the kitchen was one of those that on the script page didn't read as well as it did when we actually shot it. But I do love the lake sequence. Shooting in Colombia has been great because you could be shooting in the United States and end up with a lousy crew in bad conditions, and you might say, "Oh, we're shooting in the States," and you never know what you're going to get. And you could go to Colombia and you get a first-rate crew, you get producers who know what they're doing, you get a great production services company, and so all of a sudden you get this great new character in terms of the flavor that you have by shooting in Colombia, and yet you're surrounded by professionals who really care and really want to deliver the best movie. We like it because when you watch Gallows Hill, we think that you'll say, it's about this family and they encounter this situation and there's this creepy old house, and we really felt like we were in a foreign territory. For us, that's really great. And I think that's what audiences want to see, and I think that's what makes Gallows Hill a little special. The fact that we were able to kind of do this with Innova Films and RCN gives us a lot of experience and know-how in terms of maneuvering. When you're making a low-budget film, and this fits in partially because of our budget and partially because of the time frame that we have to work, you really don't have a lot of time to waste. You need to hit the ground running. You need to have people who are organized, who've done this before, and who also understand the speed at which you have to go. If you have a big film coming in and they're going to be there for 3-4 months, you have the luxury of time. We didn't have that, so we really needed to have a seasoned crew and seasoned producers.